Oh,
There we go.
173 Q&A. No special guests except for Clément.
Do what, sorry?
No special guests except for Clément. And
Yeah,
he's not special.
It's not special anymore.
there. Yeah, so the last 3 or 4 years we've done a Q&A. I think we do it like a month earlier normally. And this year we've done the same thing where we ask people questions. And for some reason we haven't got many questions this time. So
We've answered them all already.
Yeah. So anyway, so anyone who's listening, do please ask questions here, because what we'll do now is we've gone through and looked at some of the common questions we know is being asked about Quarkus. And then we've taken some of the stuff that we know is going on that we'll try and go into. But we would much rather have questions from anyone who's on here on the call.
And we've got our first question already.
We did?
Yeah, we've got the first question on the chat, which is Clément special?
I think Clément, you want to answer?
Probably biased. No. I'm not that special.
So,
I love everything that everyone hates. OSGI, proactives.
Oh yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, you are special.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like OSGI too.
Yes. We are two.
I liked OSGI. I just don't like the implementation of it. Can I do that? So yeah. Oh yeah. Alexei says, "What's the next big thing on your to-do list?"
Whoa. Well, first, clean up my to-do list. That will be that's actually I'm going PTO for 3 weeks, and I'm probably going to take at least 2 weeks to remove things that are really outdated. Yeah. But yeah, then the next thing for Quarkus is finishing the LTS work I'm doing, the TLS and LTS work I'm doing right now.
We can't. So, well, we already doing a few things, and I see Stupendous talks about. Look on questions here. What version 4? Oh, see, we have print questions. Well, let's talk about the to-do list. So, because there are actually a few things that are top of mind, at least on my mind. One is a big, like, let's say, meta to-do item, which is the move to a foundation. And the other one is part of that foundation, which we'll get into. There are this thing we call working groups, which is kind of revealing some of the to-do items, right? Mm-hmm. So let me talk about first the Quarkus Foundation. So we did this like it feels like forever ago, but we did a blog post about that we want to move to a foundation, and in there was well, we explained why and how that works, but basically, Quarkus has reached a level where, again, I want to be careful about not like I'm biased, of course, but we can see our numbers that we are growing greatly and expanding, and we can see the number of questions we have, except this week, apparently. we keep having, Stack Overflow, we have users, we have customers, for those who are working in Red Hat, and we just see a general, like, let's say, a good buzz and good adoption and big names both speaking publicly and privately about using Quarkus. And one thing I would say, when I joined Quarkus 5 years ago, feels like 4 or 5 years ago, that was like 6 months into the creation. No one, I think, well, everyone was trying to, hey, we want to be the new thing, etc. But I think very few believed that will happen. And what we see now is every time there's at least a conversation about a new project, Quarkus comes up together with other frameworks, whether it's Java EE or Spring, etc. So in that sense, I think we've succeeded based on the goals that came up 5 years ago. And now we're standing in front of, hey, we want to move forward. So we're thinking, like, not just the next 6 months, but what do we do a year or 2 and 3? How do we get there? And for us, which has always been a key, is to make sure it's easy to contribute to Quarkus and make sure everyone can participate, because we know not a single company can drive this. Just like if you look at Linux or Kubernetes or any other, like, not that we are as big as them, but like these generic things being used to build bigger things.
Yet.
Yeah. Yes. Of course. It is that the key thing is you get more collaboration, and we've had a lot, and we continue to have it. So one way to do that is, like, we know every time we do a major, we do the T-shirt. We send T-shirts out, and we go through the list, and it's like between 500 to 600 people who gets a T-shirt because they participated, and we are close to about 1,000 committers. But a lot of these people are, let's say, in the, not the outskirts, but in the, like, extension on top of Quarkus. We have a good bunch of contribution to the core, but not as, let's call it, diverse as one wanted to be. And we've been talking around and talk to people, and one feedback we got was people were not like, oh, this is maybe only one company, or they were not aware that it is actually like an open door. We are very, I'm not saying we're going to commit access to everybody, but we've been very liberal in contributions, as long as they're technical, sane, that kind of thing. So a big part of this is to actually open up and be more transparent, so the rest of the world knows it, and we can get more contributions. And we've been trying to do that for a while, but it always gets stuck. Then there's like a Red Hat. A lot of us is, to be honest, in internal meetings, Red Hat, then we have conversations and we forget to talk about it publicly, or vice versa. There's no ill intent. It's just that how it works. And then this year we just came to the conclusion that, well, the best way we can open up is just by saying, let's be open. And going to foundation helps on that. Things change the mindset of people.
Well, it helps, and it forces you to do that. So
yes.
Sometimes, no.
Yeah. And I see here. There's actually a question here. I'll do that immediately, because there's from Doctor said, is Quarkus legal for Open Foundation home because of Red Hat backslash in making Red Hat Linux code only available for paying customers? Distance Quarkus from Red Hat. I don't like the words he's using. So we don't want to distance, as in Red Hat is definitely still working on Quarkus. We still have, people are still growing, still investing. What we want to make sure is that there is not just a single company. And what Doug is referring to here is the Red Hat Linux source code has some limitations on how. The source code doesn't have limitations, but Red Hat changed that policy on how they made RHEL Enterprise source available. But the thing is, the base source was always free. Like, it's in that thing called CentOS Stream. So what actually changed was that instead of making RHEL available, they made CentOS the true upstream of RHEL, allowing you to influence it. And that's actually how Red Hat has operated. Sorry, not Red Hat. Quarkus has operated in 4 years now. The Quarkus community project is the main project. And then there's Red Hat Builder Quarkus, which is the productized version that Red Hat is selling. And a lot of people don't actually realize that it is this split, but there's a very small difference. Mainly
I think it's worth emphasizing that the difference in the productized build, a lot of it is about provenance and the security of the build. It's not about, we take the community version and we add all the useful features and then we put that into the productized version.
So this is what we try to do, and if you read the blog, we will see that we are not. Movement Foundation is just one part of this. Like, it's basically to make. What is technically going to happen is that the trademark and the IP of Quarkus will be moved to a non-profit foundation, meaning then there's no, like, again, this has never been the plan, but this is like, people are saying, hey, a single vendor can then change the license, which other product has done. By moving this, we literally cannot do that. It has to then stay in a non-profit foundation. There's no one that can go and swap licenses just on a whim. and then of course then it's just to improve communication and open up and try and scale out the stuff we've done, right? And if you look back 3 years ago, we had one Quarkus repository, and now we have, I think, 110 or something Quarkus repositories, and it's that kind of growth we want to continue, right? That spends up, but also in the core. So that's why we moved to foundation, and it's just to, and this is no different than what Red Hat has done for any other product they do, whether it's Linux or Kubernetes/OpenShift, Linux/RHEL, Wildflash/EAP. I'm trying to remember other names, but yeah, in that sense. And yeah, anything else I'm missing here? So anyway, so that's part of the foundation move, and that conversation led us to talk about what we call working groups. So a thing you want to do, maybe Clement, you want to do that because you did the ADR.
Yes. Yeah, and then merged it this morning. So now we have an official ADR. Woohoo! One of the things we have been for a few years is both being more open and get more people working on Quarkus or outside of the core group, outside of Red Hat and things like this, but also being able to tell the community on what we're working on. Because if you come from, it's your first time you go to Quarkus and the Quarkus GitHub, and you will see maybe not 100 commit per day, but sometimes we are close to that, and it's impossible to follow what are the next key things that we want to deliver. So working group are trying to address these two things. It's a very lightweight process. So the community and even us can discover on what others are working on in terms of initiative, or it's not bug fix, but something like new features that we want to deliver or something like that. To give some ideas, like the new TLS work I'm doing in centralizing TLS and making it work with Cert Manager, Let's Encrypt, and things like that. That's a working group. What Andy is doing around static site generation, I think his name Rock. Something. It's a working group. He's working with community and things like that. WebSocket Next is a working group. So what we want is that. So next to be Docker file generation and so on and so on. So we have this working group. To propose a working group is very simple. You go to GitHub discussions, you start discussing your ideas. We see if there is traction, if there is more than one people willing to help. And in that case, we create a GitHub project and so on. So it's very, very lightweight, but it has two advantages. One, the community can actually see what's going on. We don't know in which version is going to be delivered. It just says that we are working on that. And that's two different things. And the second thing is that it also allows us to have an idea about what's progressing, what's stuck, and things like that. As you can see, the 315 LTS is at risk because there is one issue that I still need to make a decision on, version alignment and things like that. The decision has been taken. I just need to document it, and so on. Everything in a working group is public. So it's happened on GitHub discussions, on Zulip, but there is no behind the door things. If there are calls, because that's possible, then the result of these calls need to be reported publicly. So that's very important that it get public. We started that, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, something like that. We're starting having new ideas about working group. Holly, this weekend, why over the weekend she was thinking about that, I don't know. But this weekend she said, hey, what about to test class loading working group?
Yeah, I was going to say that brings me very neatly to my to-do list, because I think I might be the first to trial the process for creating a working group. Because for a long time, because of how Quarkus does class loading, there's been a situation where extensions can change the classes, the bytecode of application code. If they want to change the bytecode of test code, it's a little bit harder and it doesn't work in every scenario because we end up sort of using multiple class loaders and proxying between class loaders and hopping between class loaders. So it's something that we've been wanting to sort out for ages. It's not easy. I started it about a year ago, and then because the to-do list is infinite, I got sidetracked. So this time I'm determined to use a working group to help make it a bit more public and help keep it on track.
Yeah, and the important thing is this is fairly new. So the topics that are here are literally just the one that's like top of mind. But the whole
Yes.
idea, and just to kind of reiterate what Clement's saying, is like we've been trying to have we have a roadmap board that has everything in it, but it just doesn't scale. Like there's no one who can keep a track on it, and it's very hard. So you came up with this, and because it worked very well for like WebSocket, which we might get into, but and the same thing with the like Rock and LTS. It's just a nice place where we can go and see what's going on, and now it sounds very product managery, but it's like a place where a group of people can work together and see what's going on. And this is something we've done, let's call it very ad hoc for the last 4 or 5 years. And now we just kind of find like, okay, we don't want to make it more heavyweight, but at least just agree on okay, here's a way to tag, hey, this is stuff we work on. And anyone can kind of, get to see it. And anyone who has the will and interest in doing something can propose it, and we have a way to work through it.
One thing I would like to add is that right now we try to design a very lightweight process. So basically, you pick an issue, you just say, okay, it's part of this working group, and then all transitions are managed automatically. But if there is, we are still very open and welcome feedback about, oh no, it's already too much. Well, it's going to be hard to do less, but so we can still adapt. It's not because it's an IDR that we are not going to update it. We are very loose in terms of ADR immutability.
So, but anyway, this is part again. This kind of transparency or change or make it more explicit how we work goes hand in hand with the foundation work. So anyone who's listening here who feels like Quarkus are going in a specific direction, just as always, code talks is like contributions are the key. And if you work for a company, an organization, or a project that wants to influence it, just this is your invitation to show up, participate, and just make your voice heard, and see how things goes. Okay, I saw a bunch of questions fly by.
I've got one that sort of might follow on from this actually, which is about Quarkus v4. So.
Yes.
So what, are any of these big enough to merit a V4? And if not, what will merit a V4? And if we don't get a V4, does that mean that Quarkus 3 was the last t-shirt?
No. So, I'll say so. The current to-do list is the LTS. We wanted the 315, which, by the way, hasn't been announced yet. It's just been discussed.
That's why it's at risk.
At risk, yeah. But we will put it out this week. But there's no secret. It's just we haven't. The blog, the draft is public and that kind of thing. But the idea is that we will do 314 in August, and then 315 the month after, September. And there will be no separate, like the 314 goes into 315. We did the same thing. We did 3.8. It started with 3.7 and put it in. So that means like there's a stabilizing LTS, and then main has a 2 months gap of development. And that means it can, well, historically, more stuff happens in 2 months than in 1 month. And then beyond that, well, the stuff that is like on the screen now is one of them. Like WebSocket is coming in, is already there, trying to make that a nicer experience. The Docker file generation here is just a start. This is a weakness we've had in Quarkus for a long time. is that when you create a Quarkus project, I think it comes with like 3 or 4 different variants of a Docker file. And if I hadn't been annoying, we probably had 15 by now, because there's been like multiple hey, I want to do a Docker file with this or this and that. So we actually want to use Quarkus build time understanding of what's actually participating to take part in Docker file generation. So the one big thing here is, for example, Clement's favorite thing is when you do a native image and doing SSL with Kafka, I think the combination is, you need like 2 or 3 native libraries, like non-Java, that has to be installed on your image. So we want to make that as easy as possible to do, because historically that's what we do in Quarkus, is to make, Java and fun, but then a native image actually possible, meaning taking care of all the nitty-gritty details. And one of those is those like binary dependencies. We start with Dockerfile here, but you could see that expand for Jib or others to somehow participate and say, hey, when I use Netty TLS and these things on a UBI-based image, I need these dependencies. If I need this on another kind of image, I need these other ones. And then, of course, hey, I don't want any of this. Let me just do it myself, which is should also be a possibility. And then beyond the Docker file generation is stuff like setting up GitHub Actions, Tecton, any kind of build. And again, this feeds in. We don't want to do too much because there's other specialized tool that does it very well. But just like for Kubernetes, you could, if you're great at writing YAML for Kubernetes, you can do that. That's no problem. But given Quarkus has a lot of info that you need in there already, it can at least give you a good start. So we want to do more of that kind of thing. The rock down here, the Quarkus server-side generation is don't put these at the same level. These are one of those, it's like an experiment that the last 6 months, Andy Devman and Philip and a bunch of others has been making web development like a really nice thing in Quarkus. So before we were just like pure backend, that's still our focus, but we hooked into like front end development, what's it called? I can't remember. Angular and React, NPM kind of workflows. And part of that, we realized, hey, we could actually do like Jekyll style generation, or hey, I have a YAML file I actually want to be able to inject into my project. So small things, and we have all the pieces. So, and that's what Rock is for. It's like a little side project of experimenting how to make that a nice thing.
That's actually important. Some working group are just explorations or experimentation or things like that we just want to publicize and people can participate and follow. Not everything is going to be a core feature like test class loading or things like that. So yeah. It's even if I believe test class loading is going to be an interesting exploration first before we found a way of doing it.
And another one, which is not a working group, I'm not sure it should be one, is the whole thing that's happening in Jakarta data. So this is like we had Panache, which added this active record kind of style view onto Hibernate or JPA. And then there was Jakarta data, which is kind of like inspired by, I think it's called Spring Data, where they kind of formalize how this kind of work. And that actually turned out to be really interesting. And I think we already have it inside. You can do it with Quarkus 3, 10, or 11. But I think there'll be more where we kind of align all these like Panache, Jakarta data, JPA to make that kind of stuff more smooth. What else? Any other thing that is on your mind, Holly or Clement?
Yeah, there is one One that I actually need to create. It's something we discussed with some members of the core team. We want to refactor a little bit how we structure the Quarkus code repository to make documentation and integration tests closer to extension instead of separate. And yes, having a working group that actually explores the different possibilities and define the action plan and prepare everything, and then click on the buttons that will do everything and break all the pending pull requests. We definitely need to have that.
Yeah, well, that one actually falls into the category of more transparency, because one of the biggest feedback we've had lately forever is, the repo of Quarkus is too big to contribute to. Which of course is funny, because we also have 900 people who did manage to contribute, so it's a mix. But we do realize the issue, and that's one of the things we want to do. But beyond that, there's always stuff moving in different places. And the thing is, Quarkus also got to a place where all the boring stuff is the important things now, like stability and APIs and going. So just to Guy Katz asked for what's a V4. So V4 is probably things that break stuff. And just to go back in history, V3 was Jakarta, like the Java E to Jakarta was the big breaker there. 2, I think there was a vertex change, if I remember. And V1 was the so V4, I think there's a potential vertex stuff coming with vertex.
No, well, I can talk about that. So we will have a vertex 5 very soon. Fall will be the first alpha of vertex 5. I cannot commit on the dates, but yeah. So we will try integrate vertex 5 starting next year, and one of the things of vertex 5 is a new native 4.2. Normally, according to the exploration we did with Julien Viette, it should not be too much breaking. So we will still be in the Quarkus 3.x branch or stream. However, there is also something that keep coming back for enforcement, which is native 5.
Native 5 does, yeah.
So native 5, yes, would probably require a Quarkus 4, because we are changing a lot of things underneath. But so far, there is no native 5 public. Well, there is a few alpha. Most of the things has been backported to native 4.2, so there is no need really for us to go there. If at some point we really need to, we will go there, and that might trigger the Quarkus 4 stream. For now, we don't necessarily have it. There is one feature which I don't know if it has been backported yet to native 4.2. It's HTTP 3. We don't have a lot of demands, but I got sometimes in some discussion, what about HTTP 3? Right now we don't support it, and it will when we have native versions that will support it, we will be able to support it. But right now the use cases are very small. There is plenty of things of HTTP 2 that are misunderstood. So let's wait a little bit before going in on yet another major HTTP version.
And other things, and just again, and I feel like these are like boring infrastructure ones, but that's because we've moved a lot of stuff to Quarkus. Like in the early days, everything was in the core. Now we kind of moved it out, not because they're bad, but because they can then evolve and expand on their own. For example, the whole lang chain for J is completely outside, allows it to move in a faster pace. But other things that are coming is stuff like, which could have an influence on V4. And again, I can't guarantee this is all like what's called speculation, but Java 26 and Leiden, and the way they're changing stuff around module system in JDK could trigger something that we don't know yet how we not how Quarkus, but also the Java community will adopt. And this is so there are some things like grooming in the future where hey, they're changing how modules and latent native image support in the DDK can influence how libraries like Quarkus or others have to behave. And some of those might also trigger a 4 or a 5, depending on how far out we are.
That's a very good point. It's very early days. We don't know exactly what is going to change. We started exploring in various projects what it will mean. Typically, Vertex is adopting GPMS. We are working on Netty to adopt GPMS too. So we are better understanding of what it will mean for something like Quarkus. But yes, it's a big unknown, which is going to be very interesting or challenging.
So yeah,
it's a working group. Let me.
Yeah, no. But otherwise, there's a ton, and this is the thing I like, that we have it. There's a bunch of stuff going on, like the rock and there's experience in the latent. There's line chain for J. I'm pretty sure the next, like, as fast as the AI world is moving right now, there will be things that pops up. But I think that's gonna be in more of, hey, there's stuff that we've been doing in middleware technology, whether that's in Camel or workflow and that kind of thing, where, hey, that's suddenly a thing that becomes, which was before niche, is now like a key thing. But again, the good thing is, I think these are all stuff that can be done on top of Quarkus and doesn't require big changes in Quarkus.
Typically, an example, Max, is what I've seen one message of Philip here. Philip is working on how to utilize AI to improve the Quarkus developer experience. That's typically something that once we are a little bit more ready, we'll create a working group there. But it doesn't need anything inside Quarkus. But the possibilities are very interesting.
And otherwise, like one thing also is all the developer experience. Like, we actually had, because of the dev UI, again, Philip, since he's on here, has been doing the dev UI enhancements where we can actually do more in all these extensions. One thing we talked about is like, hey, we can give better error messages. We can improve the general flow, and there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of extensions in Quarkus that doesn't actually utilize that yet. So, for example, if you use the REST endpoint right now and you get an error, we actually show a 404 with the code that's a failure. But I just realized this other day that if you use our OIDC security stuff, we don't do anything for dev mode. So for security reason, the product flow doesn't reveal anything. But in dev mode, we could actually give more hints and insights to the developer. And I think, again, just getting all these extensions that are out there to actually realize the power that's available with dev mode, to have that is a thing I want to see more of. Just because
and the new architecture of the dev UI, which is now an old thing because it's more than 1 year old, can really do really a lot of things, including leaking class loader, but that's something we're fixing.
And that's probably a good segue to another question from Douglas Allen, who asks, now that Spring Native is maturing, what's the major selling point for developers to adopt Quarkus instead of sticking with Spring, especially for greenfield projects? And I think you already answered that partly with the discussion about the dev UI and the dev mode, but of course there's a lot more as well.
Yes.
Well, there are a lot of performance discussions and comparisons, and we are going to make things right, let's say, because Max, I'll let you shoot this one.
Well, let's start with the well, first of all, so yes, Spring Native is maturing, and I'm happy to see that, because in the early days of Spring Native, they were not doing much except just making it run, which actually resulted in the reason why Quarkus is designed the way we do, by doing as much as possible at build time and adapt existing libraries, is to basically save time, but also memory at runtime. And Spring Native, like we have this, let's say, running joke, but we generally show that Spring Native still use more memory than a normal Java VM with Quarkus. They've changed it a little bit because they now do things a bit better. They learned, so that's good. But in general, what we like with Spring Native and other ones who do native is they're, let's say, making native image something people understand, which is great, or better at understanding. But beyond that, so Quarkus has all these developer features which are present in Spring, but not in the same way. Like you will have to add it. Quarkus just come with what's called like batteries included. And this is the dev mode that is just there always, no matter what IDE or etc. you have it. The other one is some of the APIs we're doing are just more modern or new, and a thing we didn't actually plan for was that when people starting adopting and coming from Spring, they actually write less code, and that was not anything we planned, but that's the feedback we generally have. People moving. And then the other one is the performance, and this one is very tricky because I don't like to say it, but let's say there are certain very popular websites that have an article that compares Spring with Quarkus, and there's a lot of those out there. And generally, we encourage comparisons, and generally we've seen a fairly good understanding from people on what to do and what not to do. But there are some articles out on the internet that are wrong, where when they actually measure things, they either don't take account for, like a typical one is, hey, let's write a test that takes a REST endpoint, write something to the database, and return a result. And then they run the test and shows framework X is 10 times or 5 times faster than Quarkus. And what turns out is that what they actually test is the performance of that database, not the actual framework. So one thing that we repeatedly see when we actually go in and check what those websites are comparing is that they're comparing the like apples to oranges instead of apple to apples, and they do the performance wrong, measurement wrong. And when we change them, it's the same pattern every time, that on light load, the throughput on a basic app is probably the same, but once resource gets constrained, which is where you want the framework to really be efficient, that's where Quarkus steps up and does way more with less, right?
Yeah, and so just to be really explicit about this, so Quarkus will give you a faster startup, which is well known. It will give you smaller memory consumption, and it will also give you higher throughput. So it's a triple win on the performance. It's not just that it's better on one of the metrics, it's better on every single metric, and then the developer experience is better as well.
Yes.
And there is also the carbon footprint, which tends to be way, way better because of what Martin said. We are using way fewer resources and things like that, but Holly can tell us a lot more about that. But yeah, that's an important aspect too.
Yeah, there's a strong correlation between better throughput and green IT, and Quarkus has better throughput.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, one people are like, hey, native image is save more resources because it takes faster to start up. That's not, like, native image is not the big differentiator. It's the ability to utilize resources, which we can do both in JVM mode and native image. Native image is useful if you have a use case where, like, fast startup is important, like a function-based setup, or you want to restart and just don't have a way to do, like, what's called rollover deployment. Yeah, so no.
And Stupendous Follow's got a comment on our dev mode. So Quarkus is faster startup only in production, not in dev mode. I find that doesn't get stressed enough. Although one thing I will add here is that the point of dev mode is that you only start it once and then you work until your
Yeah.
project is done.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously startup time does matter, but it's really designed because of the live reload that you shouldn't be restarting it. And I think it's easy to have the old muscle memory, because sometimes even, sort of red hatters, I'll watch them demonstrate Quarkus and they'll restart it. And it's like, no, don't restart it. You didn't need to restart it. But it's just habit. We sort of assume that we have to Control C if we make a change, which isn't true anymore.
So now, yeah, and the dev mode, I've seen this multiple times. About, oh, it starts up slower in Quarkus than it does with Spring Boot. And generally, what happens there is they start up a database or Kafka before they start up the Spring Boot app, and therefore Spring Boot doesn't take so much time up. Where Quarkus has the test containers, and then it will start things up normally. But if you don't use dev service or test container, then the startup should be similar. So if Stupendify have example where Quarkus is taking longer to start the same thing as Spring, I would love to see, but I'm assuming
there's a follow-up, which is that it depends how many projects you're jumping between. So if you're working on many projects, you start dev mode many times, which is fair enough. I sometimes set different ports just for dev mode for the different projects, because then I can start them all. There's a story I sometimes tell. I don't know who it is, but someone from the Quarkus team was at a booth at a conference and they were demonstrating it. And at the end of the day, they realized that they had 120 instances of Quarkus running on their laptop. And the funny thing is they hadn't actually noticed the problem because they just didn't use resources.
And there's two. Sorry, one is actually because of that that we can start that many. We have where you can pick a port, of course, but also then there's a debug port. And until recently, 3-4 months ago, the debug port was default 5055 or something. But now if 5055 is taken, it's going to pick a new one. Right? So you can actually debug all your dev mode without having to do any setup.
Typically, last week I was working on system of applications. I have 5, 6, 7, 6 applications all running in dev mode, side by side with different ports. Even one using a random port, which was actually tricky because then I have to scroll up to find the port in the log, but that's my mistake, not Quarkus mistake. I ran it for 3 days without rebooting a single one. It was all working well, and I was switching from one to the others. And
and I think this, maybe Eric, you already showed this one, but this is the big thing I have with, like, the question was, like, now Spring Native exists, how is it good? Like, the key thing is to remember, majority of people using Quarkus does not do it for native mode. The best numbers we have indication is somewhere between 10% to 30%, depending on how you count, use native mode. Majority is JVM mode, because the JVM mode is fast enough, right, and has some benefits. So the native image supporting Spring is just a checkbox feature. It's the whole experience that makes the big difference.
And if people would like to hear more from Eric, he'll be giving a talk on Quarkus for Spring developers for the Brazilian Discord Quarkus Club later on today in about 3 or 4 hours, I think. So I've put the URL in. If people, he'll be talking through, because there was a question earlier as well about Spring interceptors and your options if you're using Spring code base. And
and I see Sabenda's follow up with it. His point is to he had this question about Maven generate code. So he was saying that the demo was slow on restart. So he's asking, did generate code Maven execute every time I run Quarkus dev, and if so, why? Shouldn't we skip it if no file has changed? So yes, we should. And if you can give an example of where that happens, let us know. There is, of course, the generate code Maven goal will be executed if there's a detection found, and if it runs too much, then that's a bug in that extension that handles the code generation. So Benefall, if you have that, do tell. Like I says, like it should only run if it's changed. If not, then let us know. And again, this is important. Like, we have a lot of extensions. So if you're using an extension that has a bug that triggers it for you, then of course you have a worse experience. So if you have an example, we'll definitely want to know. But my understanding, stuff like the gRPC, the Hibernate repository generation, and stuff that's done in some of these ways should only do it if necessary, or be so fast you don't care. But yeah, so let's get the specific example we can look at. And mind you, this is like nothing is perfect. So a lot of stuff you've done has been improved over time. Like the early days, we were doing stuff repeatedly, but it didn't take much time, so therefore it wasn't a big issue. But then people started using it for bigger and bigger things. Like the classic one was when someone showed up with we did Hibernate for small projects. Oh, sorry, Quarkus for small projects, like a few hundred, maybe 1,000 entities. And then someone showed up with like 4,000 entities, and there was like it triggered a specific bug that Hibernate just kind of collapsed on itself and just took too long. We got the example, and then we were down to standard like sub 1 second restart, even for massive models. So,
yeah, and we love hearing about these use cases because sometimes, in our test code base, for obvious reasons, we don't necessarily start with huge monster things, and we can't cover everything because it's such a wide world out there. So yeah, bring us your use cases.
Cool. Is there any you want to take a new one?
Yes, there is one from Sebi that is very interesting about WASM and WASI. And actually, it's yes. We have been doing on and off exploration around that. Nothing very serious right now, but there are things that we are looking. We do not know. We don't have any big plan in the future. It's mostly playing around and things like this.
Yeah, and it's actually one of the just coming back to the foundation about being transparent, open. Another thing, we have our team calls that until now has been internal. We want to open some of that up, and one of the things we actually want to open up for, one of the topics we want to do is actually around WASM. There's Andrea. We have so many Andreas. I forgot his last name now. But Andrea has been writing. He's the named. He's written a WASM interpreter in Java, right? So you can take WASM code and run, which has some instant use cases in the world of integration and other stuff. So there is some experimentation in that area, and something I think we might, have an insights-like episode on with the Quarkus team and others to kind of explore. But yeah, as Clement said, it's more experiments, nothing concrete on there.
Another question that I will have to answer: Will Quarkus focus on virtual thread support, or should we expect to focus on Vertex/Mutiny? We have virtual thread support for almost 2 years now, so I think you can safely go with virtual threads, except if you really need very, very high concurrency with very low resources, then you can use to pure reactive. But we have virtual thread support for 2 years. There are things that doesn't work, but it's not our fault. Typically, sometimes a carrier thread get pinned during class loading because the JVM is doing a native frames during class loading, but that's not something we can fix. That's virtual thread limitations. We try to avoid a lot of them. Even for this one, we actually do have a workaround that is not yet shipped, but it will be very soon. But yeah, virtual threads are there, and I actually have wrote almost all my application using virtual threads now.
Yeah.
And even some of the ones that are our fault, we fixed. So like Mario Fusco put in a PR to Jackson, for example, because Jackson was pinning the thread, and so we now have been able to help the community resolve that.
Yeah, I did the same for Hibernate and Narayana. So yes, so when we realize that one of our popular extension is really doing something bad, we just go and fix it.
Yeah. So, and this is where It's a complicated topic because we've had this repeatedly from the beginning. People say, "Oh, Quarkus is reactive, and therefore we have to do reactive with it." You don't. Quarkus core is done in reactive manner like with Vertex, and we have nice APIs around Vertex and Mutiny because reactive programming had and have advantages over any of the past and future approaches. But it does not mean that we don't support virtual threads. We've supported it from early time. We've just been very explicit that there are limitations, which you won't hear from other people. That hey, you just add like 1,000 million worth of threads and then everything is fine. But no, you still have a database. You still have a data C driver. You still have like the typical problems you have at async programming. You have in virtual threads. So to be clear, we will have both, all three of them, like the classical programming, the reactive programming, publicized with reactive streams and Mutiny. But we will also have virtual thread support. And
yeah, if people want to read more, then Clément's got an excellent blog. So
yeah, it's a series. So see the first one, look at the second one and the third one where, oh yeah, you can have 1 million threads, but if your connection pool to your database only contains 10 connections, and it's not going to change anything. You can try to put a lot of things under the rug, but at some point, it's still there.
The rug explodes.
Yes.
And then for those who don't know, we also the Quarkus team and Mandel team and others, they work very heavily with our OpenJDK team, which then works together with Oracle. And we have been, even before virtual threads was cool, we've been talking to them about like, hey, we like the very early days of virtual threads, we were like, hey, we can actually do exactly the thing we need to do and hook in the right places and have a really smooth experience. And then when they release it, they actually shut down that opportunity because they felt it was not ready for prime time. So this is about being able to participate in the scheduling. And that's actually being worked on as a proposal in the upcoming Java versions, right?
I actually sent the first email to the Loom mailing list. I think it was July 2021 or 2022, so a long time ago, explaining, hey, we will need that feature if we want to go further. But they shut it down. But maybe they are trying to see if they can revisit that. So that for us, it's going to be a big opportunity.
So I'll say this. Quarkus support is the framework we know that supports virtual threads the best. There's others who only support virtual threads, and there's others who have who treat virtual threads as they were just any other thread, which is just not what they are for. So we will support all three and see how the ecosystem follow, and we will also help move it forward in that sense. I saw there was a question about Saga, long way up.
And I think Eric pointed to a Quarkus Insights episode on that as well.
My memory is too short on my memory can't support Saga, it's too long. But this is something that's evolving and improving. And I saw Martin Stefanko saying that he's joined the Quarkus team and that was the wrong thing. So Martin is actually stepping up and doing some of this stuff, which I think will improve in the future. What else did we miss? We're hitting around our time now. There's one about adoption rate. But Clement's book will have a new version.
Whoa. I moved to a very old house with a lot of renovations to do, so I cannot do both. So I need to pick one. So now it's not planned yet, at least not before. Maybe if we do a Quarkus 4 at some point with HTTP 3 and things like that, then yes, I might revisit some part of it. But yeah.
And by the way, I want to do a shout out for the Quarkus in Action book that I still think is in preview. Was coming out.
It's in preview. I think it's planned to be published by the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So if you that's a good one, and then there's one about adoption rate. What was it?
Yeah, it was one of the first one. What's the
how would you describe Quarkus adoption rate until now? Perfect. And I don't know. Has it been what I had expected? Has it been what I think everyone wants it? So let me say this: the adoption rate we have, I definitely think, is more than people expected it to be. There are people who wanted us, Quarkus should take over the world and be the most dominant thing after 1 year of existing. I think that's an impossibility. But I'm definitely happy with it. Is Red Hat happy? I assume so. They're still paying and still investing and still growing.
And sending T-shirts, so that's good.
Yeah, I'll say this, and this is my completely personal experiences. I've been participating in the 20 years I've been at Red Hat on multiple big products like Hibernate, those or AS and App Server, and others like framework like Seam or others that kind of had their own different growth. Keycloak is another one. And as far as I can see, the only other thing that outgrows our growth rate is Keycloak. Keycloak is is very popular.
rightly popular.
And Quarkus is second in that area.
But Keycloak is based on Quarkus, so we will catch up, right?
Yeah, that's but the cool thing is that what we're seeing more and more is the question about how do we actually move from X to Quarkus?
Yes.
And the great thing with the industry right now is many people have moved over to, I'm not going to say full microservices, but instead of big massive monoliths, they have like smaller sections. And the cool thing is that allows for something like Quarkus to be tried out. And that's what we see repeatedly again and again, that they take an existing application with like 4 parts or 50, and they pick one and replace it, or they pick a new one and say, hey, let's try this one. And then they learn, and some stay with that mix and they do it, but others say, hey, we're just going to roll out Quarkus across the board because it gave us the benefits that we were after. And yeah, and we have I need to be careful. I'm not saying the name. We have someone that's going to be on July, I guess it's next Monday, 22nd.
Yeah. Next Monday, yes.
Yes, which actually is which again another thing. This is what I was going to say. I have never experienced a time where people come from other companies and say, "Hey, we want to talk about this thing." Like with Hibernate, AS, and stuff. That's been hard to do. Like that's just. We have so many user stories and statements from people saying, hey, we've done this, we want to explain. And one of those coming up next week, which is super interesting because he sent me an email saying, hey, and this is almost a direct quote, I had to get to P99 and I could just not get there with Spring and Go. And we tried with Quarkus, it was a leap of faith, and now we converted all over.
So it was less than 10 milliseconds on 99th percentiles or something like that.
It was like, and I'm pretty sure he's doing reactive and the whole 9 yards. But that's the kind of stories that pops up. And so that's why when I get the question, is adoption rate going? I think it seems to be going just fine when we have people. Because I always say for everyone we hear about, that's probably 1,000 that we never hear about. Yeah. And we hear about a lot. So yeah.
I'm living in a very small city in France, and at some point I was meeting with the father of a friend of my daughter, and you just say, "Oh, by the way, our company is actually using Quarkus." Where I'm living, believe me, there is no IT or almost no IT at all. So I was like, "Oh, cool." And something Julien Ponge was telling me, he went to the end of the year parties of his daughter's school, and he met 2 users of Quarkus that ask question about it. So it's like
That's a French.
crazy. Yeah, it's a French thing, but
But I've had taxi drivers tell me about it as well. I
whoa.
can't remember where it was, but there was definitely like there's the sort of, you know, the taxi test for like when taxi drivers hear you talking about it and like jump in. And I can't remember where it was. I think it might have been at J Nation.
Okay. So we have a few. There's a few very specific. Just since now people ask for it, like there's like he's terrible programmer, like everyone else, like everyone like us. We have a lot of Spring inside in our firm. We use these for things like authentication in Java. Is there a way to leverage that code base easily in Quarkus? So I'm not. So those Spring interceptors, I assume, is going to have like use of Spring APIs. Some of them you can maybe you use. I don't. We have the Spring compatibility layer, but in general, you might have to separate some of it out depending on what those do, because if they're interceptors, they assume something happens before and after or during. So yeah, that depends on the use case. Terrible program, so you have to ask a specific question, but.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two basic options for Spring. One is to use Open Rewrite Recipes or some other kind of, you know, migration library. The other is to use Spring compatibility libraries. Depending how typical the usage of Spring is and how complex it is, they may get you all of the way. They may only get you part of the way. But we can now say as well that if you want to hear more, Eric's got his talk in definitely 2 or 3 hours now, and we put the YouTube link in.
Yeah.
So he'll be talking through a lot of the kind of the differences and what you can reuse and what you might need to do fresh.
For sure. And then I saw one from Sergey, if we could talk about the TLS features coming. That one. And since Clement he loves this feature.
I would have hoped that Sergey was aware of it. So there is few aspects of it. The first one is that we are going. It's already shipped now, but we now have the possibility to centralize all the TLS configuration under Quarkus.tls with everything under that, instead of having every subsystem having its own TLS configurations. And by centralizing, we also fixed a lot of issues, misconceptions, incompletions in terms of configuration and things like that. So that was I've found out a couple of very weird things.
Maybe highlight for those, because I keep forgetting it. Like the part here is not like, one thing is to turn it on or off, but it's all this stuff about managing certificates. That's the centralized stuff, right?
So typically, all the management is now going to be all managed under the same config tree, but we also have ways to run your dev mode, your local dev mode, using a trusted certificates. And if you are using TLS in production, I would heavily recommend to run your local application using TLS2, because things are slightly different when you do TLS or not TLS. And it will be a trusted certificate, so it's great. We are also integrated with Cert Manager if you are on Kubernetes, so all the reload and things like that is managed. We are integrating with Let's Encrypt, where you will have a few commands to negotiate with Let's Encrypt, get the certificates, install it, reload it, revoke it, and so on. So that's all these things that we are trying to make it way better. And reloading certificates on the fly is interesting when you look at the network level.
Yeah. And and this just go hand in hand with the model that we have of trying to not mock. Not that we don't like mocks, but like we want people to actually serialize their data correctly, or fully, to discover, oh shit, I forgot to register this for reflection native mode, or oh I forgot I didn't do the conversion correctly or whatever, which you skip when you call directly. And the same thing happened with HTTPS. Again, this is not as often, but when you do HTTPS, there are slightly different in behavior, whether you're talking gRPC or Kafka or HTTP. And this stuff just it's a small thing, but just allows you to not have to go and look up, oh, for this OS or for this specific setup, how do I enable it? And with what Clement has done now, is like, yeah, just easy and, well, I'm not gonna say easy, but easier, and to get it done. Yeah,
we'll try to make it even easier for the local dev, but also for testing with TLS. But yeah, we still have a bit of work, but we are mostly there. It's when I look at what we were 6 months ago and where we are right now, it's a big difference.
Cool. And I see Martin. I'm not sure he's trolling us. He's like, do people also migrate from Quarkus to something else? I don't know of any examples. I think that's probably our bubble, but let's just leave it at that. No one will. You come here and you stay.
And if people leave, they're too polite to tell us.
Yeah. But actually, so this is like, just to be fun, like one of the approaches Quarkus took from early on was to not try and be what's called religious about things. Like everything has to be in Java, everything has to be by Quarkus. Like we tried to pick the best stuff we had, like, you know, Hibernate and Vertex and Mutiny and that API we good at. But for example, for telemetry, we use Micrometer or OpenTelemetry or Prometheus to do that collection. Like we are trying to do as the industry is moving forward. So if you for some reason get forced by Big Boss to use something else, you're not in a bad state. Oh, and let's do this one. Is there open read-write recipe available for Java EE to Quarkus? Yes, there is. Since Quarkus 3, we have a feature called Quarkus Update, which behind the scenes, or not behind the scenes, actually, it's implemented by using open rewrite. So, and one part of that is Java EE, is from Java EE to Jakarta if you're running Quarkus. If you want to move from Java EE to Quarkus, there are some recipes on Open Rewrite's websites that does some of that stuff. But I think there's the migration toolkit that Red Hat is doing that also has some Open Rewrite. And then there's some other tools that's coming up that is doing this job. I'm not sure how much that's going to be in Open Rewrite, but there are tools that are being that exist and is happening as we speak that should make Java EE to Quarkus fairly straightforward. Yeah. Cool. Did we get through all? So that
I think we did. Yeah.
That was a good round with no questions. So that.
Yeah.
So next time, just don't ask. Just. So that's good.
Because we cannot.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyway, I think we got through everything, right? I think we did. So yeah. Cool.
Well, and if you forgot your questions, we are still on Zlib. We are still on GitHub discussions. So go post, and we will reply.
We will do that. So now, for everyone else, enjoy your summer, and yeah, next week there'll be someone from another company than Red Hat talk about why he likes Quarkus.
A special guest.
Very special guest.
Which is not me, just to be clear. Right?
A truly special guest.
Truly, yeah.
Will do. Awesome. Let's call it. And
See you all.